Physical damage Zhongli is entirely viable and he is super functional as a main DPS. Let's face it, anyone can hit huge meteors if they build their character right, but not everyone's able to see how incredible main DPS Zhongli is, and that's why you're watching this video. Well, don't you worry, I've been heavily researching physical DPS Zhongli from the Zhongli mains community, and all of the information that I'm about to present to you today has been mathematically proven. So today I want to talk about weapons, artifacts, sets, and if you stay tuned, you'll learn about some extra tips for using physical DPS Zhongli at the end of the video. So first things first, why does physical DPS Zhongli actually work? A lot of characters can be physical DPS, but not all of them can actually succeed in putting out good damage numbers. The reason Zhongli is able to do that is specifically because of his Ascension 2 passive that basically just gives him extra damage based off of his HP. He already has 5-star base stats, so his stats are pretty dang good, but when you increase his damage done based on his HP pool, you're looking at a ton of extra damage. Basically, the thicker your Geo Archon, the thicker your damage is going to be. So unlike the last video, we're going to start with weapons because there's a secret weapon that only polearm users have that other characters do not, and it needs to be said. Crescent Pike is absolutely incredibly broken. This pike provides physical damage bonus, and it makes it so that after getting an energy particle, you deal bonus damage based on your attack for every single normal attack. The extra damage you're getting from Crescent Pike gets an increase based on your physical damage bonus, and attacks that combo get more uptime for Crescent Pike. Like when Zhongli kicks his spear, it hits for every single spear hit. The reason we all pray to Crescent Pike every night is because it's free to play craftable, and it is definitely the most broken physical weapon in the game. I know it's incredibly hard to believe, but it outdoes every single 5-star weapon except for Staff of Homa when it comes to physical damage. If we're going down a list of the best weapons to use with physical damage Zhongli, it starts with Staff of Homa and then is followed by Crescent Pike. The only reason Staff of Homa is better on Zhongli is because it actually gives him extra HP, which gives him even more bonus damage, and it has really high base attack and it has crit damage sub. But anyways, post Staff of Homa is going to be Crescent Pike, and then below Crescent Pike on the list is going to be Primordial Jadewing Spear, which is on the non-event banner, but started originally as an event weapon. Jadewing Spear lets you build crit, which is incredibly important for all sorts of damage dealers, and the passive is just really strong. After Primordial Jadewing Spear, Deathmatch comes next, followed by Blackcliff, and Deathmatch passive is just super strong, which is why Blackcliff doesn't beat it, but at max stacks, Blackcliff will outperform Deathmatch, so it really depends on what content you're doing. Vortex Vanquisher is worse than Blackcliff and Deathmatch at 0 stacks, but it is better than them at max stacks. After Vortex Vanquisher comes Skyward Spine, which really benefits from giving the extra physical damage, and it gives you a slight attack speed buff, so that will be taken into account in your total damage output for sure. To be honest, if you're not using Homa, you should definitely be using Crescent Pike because it literally just outdoes every single other weapon. If you don't have a polearm prototype to go ahead and craft Crescent Pike, you can get one from completing floor 3 chamber 3 of Spiral Abyss, you can get one from Frostbearing Tree and Dragon Spine at level 8, and you can also get one at the jewelry shop in Leeway. In case it's the apocalypse and your entire weapon inventory gets deleted, then you can just use the white tassel, which can be found in chests. So now that you know which weapons are best for physical DPS Zhongli, we are going to go ahead and move on to artifacts. I'll be blunt, there's a lot of options for artifacts here, and all of them do similar amounts of damage, but I can tell you which ones are technically the best, even if by a few damage. As of 1.5, the 4-piece Pale Flame is the new strongest physical set. Unfortunately, it does have an activation requirement in order to be the best, but when you have it activated, you have a total of 50% more physical damage and 18% attack when you're at max stats. The nice thing is that his Geo Pillar can constantly proc the effect, so if you play your cards right, you'll always have the set effect up, and it is really strong. One sort of con of this set, though, is that when you're using physical DPS Zhongli, you have to make sure to manage who you're hitting, so that way you don't actually leave your pillar, and that is the one downside of using Pale Flame with him. Because if you get too far from your pillar, then you can't proc the effect, which means that you're only going to be getting 25% physical damage, and it's like the 4-piece doesn't even exist. So if you don't like the thought of that, then you can run 2 Pale Flame and 2 Bloodstained Chivalry, which will accomplish a similar thing, you'll just be missing out on the 18% attack. In the long run, that set might be easier to use, but it is not technically the highest damaging set. I had my math person run some calculations, and as it turns out, the 4-piece Gladiator set is about on par, and in some situations even slightly better than 2 Pale Flame, 2 Bloodstained. There's a similar story with 2 Bloodstained, 2 Gladiator. It's technically the weakest of the sets, but it's pretty dang close. Speaking of close, Retracing Bolide is in the same boat as 2 Gladiator, 2 Bloodstained. It's super viable, but the problem with Bolide is that it's just upping your normal attack damage by roughly 40%, and that gets outdone by the 50% bonus from the physical damage Pale Flame Bloodstained sets. Realistically, it's not a problem to run Bolide or 2 Glad, 2 Bloodstained, or any of these other sets that were mentioned mentioned, it's just not as optimal as running 4 Pale Flame and trying to keep 100% uptime. To be completely honest, they're all super close, and I would just take whatever set gives you better stats. For example, if you're using 4-piece Gladiator with good crit rate and crit damage, use that set over 4 Pale Flame, since the damage is close enough to where substats would make the difference in your build. Stick to one of these listed builds, but pick the one that you have the best setup for. Speaking of stats and substats, what you're going to want to go for is attack percent, physical damage, and crit on this build in late game. Around when your weapons get to level 80, attack is going to start being stronger than HP for Zhongli. So here's something to think about. HP isn't bad to build, but in order to make HP useful, you have to unlock its Ascension too. So if you're in really early game, it's not necessarily worth using HP, but if you do want to get the most out of his shield and meteor, then HP will buff your shield a ton. And Bolide also helps with that. And also just keep in mind that physical damage doesn't react with anything, so you're going to see lower numbers if you build HP than attack. As for your crit circlet, the rule is 40-80. We say this in every video, but you want 40% crit rate and 80% crit damage, and if you can't get those numbers, you want to build attack circlet instead of crit. Now that you know the builds for your Zhongli, here's a couple general tips to help you get going. One major tip I have for you is to use double Geo. I know I said this in my last video, but Geo Resonance increases your damage and shield strength by 15%, which is super helpful for Zhongli because he's a melee character. I like to use him with Geo Traveler because Traveler gives a crit rate buff after using their Q, so you can use their Q, create a sort of arena for Zhongli to resonate his pillar off of, and right after the Q you're going to get insane crit rate, so you can kind of just go ham in that zone. I also think it's super fun to run Superconduct teams because what Superconduct does is it lowers physical resistance of enemies, so you can go ahead and lower their resistances by mixing Electro and Cryo, and that will allow you to do extra damage with your Zhongli. My personal favorite characters to run are Fischl and Kaya because Fischl has a ton of Electro uptime with Oz, and then Kaya also allows you to basically do cryo damage to anyone who gets in your melee range, which is super helpful for physical Zhongli. One final tip for you I have is to animation cancel with Zhongli. It's super viable with him because he has a shield, which makes it forgiving for him to run out of stamina, so if you want to maximize your damage, you can use sprint to animation cancel any attacks that you have. Regarding the best possible combo, I'm going to be discussing that in my ultimate play guide video, but just know that if you use Crescent Pike, you shouldn't spam charged attacks. If you follow all these steps in this video, you should be doing a ton more damage with your Zhongli, so make sure to go roll that Spiral Abyss this cycle because Spiral Abyss is going to be all about physical damage and cryo damage, and Zhongli is half of that. If you've enjoyed this content, make sure to subscribe down below. I upload a ton of Genshin Impact content relating to news, guides, and discussions. If you want to be a part of the discussion, you can go ahead and join my Discord, which is also in the description as well, and my socials will be in the top comment. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I hope that your Zhongli is dealing a ton of damage now.